Welcome, everyone. Welcome, folks on Zoom. Welcome, folks in the room. Nice to see you all. And thanks for coming out on, I guess we don't really call it Boxing Day in the United States, but the day after Christmas, which is sometimes a low energy kind of day. So nice to come out and have a class. So I appreciate you all being up for it. Folks on Zoom, if you wouldn't mind having your cameras on, I can actually see you. I've got my computer in front of me and I can see your little squares. And the folks in the room then can see you too, and we can feel more connected and together. So if you're able to, it would be great to put your cameras on. So we're going to start with just short prayers, refuge and bodhicitta, 4 immeasurable thoughts, just kind of reconnect with our motivation. And then we'll move on from there and do the rest of the session. So getting yourself into class mode, settling the body. Sangye Juron Soge Junamba Janjo Badu Dani Kapsuchi Dagi Junyangi Besonamgi Drola Penche Sangye Jupasho Sangye Juron Soge Junamba Janjo Badu Dani Kapsuchi Dagi Junyangi Besonamgi Drola Ben Sangye Jubasho Sangye Ajuron Sogi Chunamba Janju Badu Dani Kapsuchi Dagi Junyangi Besonamgi Drola Benchi Sangye Jubasho. And the 4 immeasurable thoughts. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that knows no suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of attachment and hatred for those held close and distant. So just letting your mind reconnect with those ideas of love, compassion, joy, and equanimity through the lens of refuge and bodhicitta. This is why I study. This is why I practice. And all of this will lead to greater well-being for myself as well. But may I do all of this for others. Okay. So tonight we're going to look at Mahamudra and Mahamudra meditation, and then we'll do a little Mahamudra meditation. And I'm curious how many of you have had Mahamudra teachings before. Is this a word that's familiar to you guys here? Yeah, a couple of you. Is it brand new to a few of you as well? Yeah, brand new. Some folks in between, you're like, I've heard it, I don't really know. Yeah, folks online, emojis, hand gestures. How many of you have had some sort of teaching on Mahamudra? Half, maybe? Yeah, halvesies. Yeah, okay. Excellent. All right. Well, I shall not pitch it to total beginners with the assumption that even the total beginners are sharp cookies. So you'll be able to catch up, no problem. How's that? How's that? And also there's amazing resources on this topic. So if you want to fill in any of the blanks, that's out there. Mahamudra meditation is one of the most, how to say, immediately beneficial practices that you can do that also has this amazing long-term effect if you bring it into your daily practice and really weave it in every single day. But even if you don't do it every single day, just doing it once actually creates a much more spacious day with a lot more freedom for creativity, a lot more freedom to reconnect with your deepest core values. It really brings the space back. And, we're trying to really hit that beautiful experiential sense of spacious, not spacey. Spacious, not spacey. So when you're spacious, what you really want is for that kind of active, alive, aware focus where you can make decisions quickly if you need to, but you're not over anticipating. You're not preempting. You're not over planning. You're not overthinking, but you're sharp. You're clear. But there's not a million thoughts in your head. There's just alertness. And this happens usually for us in things that we love to focus on. If you're an artist, if you're a musician, sometimes in nature, sometimes in conversation with your oldest friends where there's that kind of flow, you feel that really sharp, clear, alert focus that's not crowded with too many words, but is also not spacey, like all vague, out in space, just kind of like kind of relaxed, kind of sleepy. You know, the edges of your clarity are kind of like fuzzy. You don't want that feeling like you've just woken up from a nap at the wrong time, right? It's not that kind of space. It's spacious. Do you know what I mean? That feeling? And that kind of flow state feeling is what we are trying to touch, develop, and deepen in Mahamudra meditation, so that when we're out of meditation, we really bring that quality to the rest of our lives. And so the trick here is to keep yourself relaxed and very focused. Usually focus goes with stress, relaxation goes with sleep. We need to break those associations and make a new marriage: focus, relaxation. And remember that you already do this in certain chapters of your life, certain activities in your life. Even people who really love sports, if you've drilled a play again and again and again, then when you're in the actual game with your teammates, you sometimes get into that flow state of you do this, then I do that, then I pass this, and then I do that. But you're not thinking those words. It's automatic. It becomes effortless because of all the effort that preceded it. For me, I really found a connection when I thought about my relationship to music. Before I was a nun, I was in a jazz band, right? Fun fact. And when I was in this jazz band, there was a lot of rehearsals. Yeah, and you'd rehearse and you'd rehearse and you'd get the kinks out. And then with jazz, of course, there's periods of improv, but you can't improv and just kind of go for it without having first connected to the piece and really lived through all the different chapters of a piece of music to be able to start to play. And then when we'd actually have the performance, you're not thinking about all the words. You might not, or thinking about all the notes. You might not even be reading the notes because you've read them so many times. They're in there. And then when it gets time for improv, you're so rehearsed you can play. It's like you're so prepared you can play. But to play without preparation is just a big mess. So whatever example of that in your life that you can touch, try and understand that this kind of meditation is speaking to and acting on and developing something that you've already been able to do in your life somewhere and is expanding it into more parts of your life. So it's a tool. And from a Buddhist perspective, it's a tool to fundamentally to cut the root of ignorance, to cut the negative habitual patterns, to realize reality directly. And the focal object is the mind. And it's powerful practice. But even if you don't understand all the philosophy behind it, even the most basic version can help you reconnect to that spacious, creative, focused place and bring it into more parts of your life. So I'll just kind of share a few of the bits and pieces about this word, like etymology and context and things like that. And this may only be fun for the nerds. So if you're not a nerd, this part will be short. And if you are a nerd, sorry, it's short. Okay, so Mahamudra means, it's a Sanskrit word that means great seal, like stamp, like a stamped seal, not like an animal seal. And so in Mahayana meditation practice, if these kind of meditations focus on the natures of mind, and they're found in the Kagyu, Sakyu, and Gaelic traditions, not as much in the Nyingma tradition. Interesting, fun fact. And what we're talking about here is then subdividing it. What are you focusing on? Okay, you're focusing on the mind, but what characteristic of the mind? What aspect of consciousness and awareness are you zooming in on? So Mahamudra meditation's distinctive characteristic is that it focuses on the mind itself and its intimate relation with the world of conventional appearances and with voidness, emptiness of inherent existence. So confusion and unawareness or ignorance of this relative drive, of this relation, drive our disturbing emotions and compulsive behavior, resulting in unrelenting suffering and problems. Mahamudra meditation is a highly effective method for attaining liberation from this suffering and for becoming enlightened, but only when undertaken on a firm foundation. This means that extensive training in the entire Lamrim graded path is required for progress to be made. So if you want this to be more than like stress symptoms relief, there needs to be foundational work done. But even if you don't do that foundational work, it's good for stress relief. Okay, but to know that to really deepen into the heart of the essence of this practice, you need to have some practice of what's called the Lamrim, the gradual path to enlightenment. So anyway, some of you know those vocab, some of you don't, but it'll keep coming up in Dharma centers, so you'll be able to circle back if you want. Okay, so Mahamudra, there's sutra and tantra perspectives. There's relative and ultimate perspectives. And then there's looking at Mahamudra versus Dzogchen. So if I put that frame up, are those words you've heard before? Or have I lost half the room? If I say sutra versus tantra, do you have some sense of the dichotomy I'm speaking to? Yeah, and if I say relative versus ultimate, yeah. And then when I say Mahamudra versus Dzogchen, Dzogchen is the type of meditation that's quite similar to Mahamudra, but is done in the Nyingma tradition and somewhat in the Kagyu and other traditions. And they're easily conflated because their techniques are so similar, because the focal object is the mind. But Dzogchen is less popular in the Gelug tradition, in our tradition. But I'll talk about it a little bit just to give you a sense of it. So Dzogchen, what the other traditions do, they offer this direct, immediate introduction to the nature of mind, like the pointing out instruction. You hear this phrase. While Mahamudra often provides a more gradual path, using a variety of meditative techniques to arrive at the same realization. Each technique has their benefits and potential pitfalls, depending on the affinities and skill of both teacher and student. So if you're thinking, all right, I want to meditate on the nature of mind, there's this technique where you just flash, you get a sense of it. You're introduced, you have like a wow moment, a peak experience. And then there's this other technique where you gradually peel back layers and get to that experience. So the benefit of the Dzogchen approach is you don't overthink it. You don't overconceptualize. You don't kind of crush the creativity of this practice by like clogging it with definitions. The pitfall, the potential pitfall, is that you think that just kind of being thoughtless, being without verbal thoughts, being without too much chatter is it. And you oversimplify. And you think, oh, emptying out the mind, that's all I have to do, which is not at all the point really of any Buddhist meditation, but is misunderstood very easily. So the benefit of Dzogchen is that flash of like not overthinking kind of intrinsic wisdom that we have in developing it. The pitfall is that you are lazy. So anyway, it could go either way, and it depends on affinities. With Mahamudra meditation, this gradual approach, the benefit is that there are less potential errors in terms of when you actually land on layers of the focal object, you actually probably are pretty close or good enough. The pitfall is that you are going gradually, and so there's plenty of time to overthink it, to make it too complicated, to go off on tangents, and, you know, and I guess sort of doubt yourself. So what you want to do is whichever technique you choose and whichever technique you've been introduced to, they're equally beneficial, but are they equally beneficial for you? And is the teacher aware of this positive side and able to help you prevent the pitfalls is what you want to kind of look to. So it's not a hierarchy of which one is better. It's more like affinity, which one speaks to you. And personally, you know, I think touching different forms of Buddhist meditation, different forms of even Tibetan Buddhism is a nice way to cross-fertilize And also it's useful to have one tradition that you know quite well, so that when you hear other teachings, it augments it. It doesn't confuse you. Do you know what I mean? Right? Because if you hear lots of teachings before getting clear on one, you might not know what are synonymous and what are actually totally different presentations. Then when you actually do your practice, you're like, what? So getting kind of clear on one is very helpful. So we're focusing on Mahamudra, not because it's better, but because that's the topic of our tradition and where we have the most clarity, not to diminish the Dzogchen at all. So Mahamudra and Dzogchen are profound Tibetan Buddhist paths that reveal mind's true nature, differing mainly in emphasis of method. So in Mahamudra, what we're going to do tonight, we often start with calm abiding and then insight, while Dzogchen immediately introduces Rigpa, or pristine awareness, via pointing out instructions, training awareness directly through appearances without altering them. Both aim for the same ultimate awakening, like different rivers reaching the same ocean. So what we're going to do tonight is first try and just find some sense of the subjective experience of being aware, and landing on that as our focal object of single-pointedness. So in Tibetan Buddhism, we talk about analytical meditation and single-pointed meditation. Here you're starting with focus and settle and stay. Don't move, don't analyze, don't talk to yourself about it. And of course, you will talk to yourself about it and you will move around, but that is not part of the meditation. That's part of your adjustment process of letting go of distractions, right? So you're staying steady, and then, you know, like the dog might woof and you're like, oh, a dog woofed. Then you come back to your focal object. Or you might think, wait, what am I doing? And you're like, oh, I'm having doubt, doesn't matter. Anyway, back to the focal object. Yeah. Rather than, okay, do I have it? Do I have it? Do I have it? What is it? What is it? Don't let yourself do that. Just be like, everything I'm thinking is an aspect of awareness. There's no need to get tight about it. Just be. So you'll hear this analogy a lot in Buddhist circles of try and abide in the sky, don't identify with the clouds, which is just analogous, right, to the state of mind that we're trying to cultivate in this meditation. The mind has these two characteristics simultaneously. They have what is bright and open and spacious and reflective like the sky. And then it also has thoughts or states of mind, mental factors like clouds, some of which are beautiful, some of which are scary. Our mental weather is complicated and always changing. In this meditation, you're trying to de-identify from the weather, not pretend that it isn't there, not try to change it, not try to push it away, but just know there is something else present too. And zoom in there, just as if you'd taken an airplane up through the clouds and then saw the grand expanse. We're trying to do that with our focus. And so the first step sometimes is just watching the weather for a while until we don't need to. You're like, oh yeah, I'm having this thought and that thought. I'm having this weather and that weather. Some of it's quite repetitive. Oh, themes reoccur. Oh, that's a new one. That's exciting. And then just kind of at some point you call it and go, enough cloud watching. I've been identifying with my clouds, my weather, all my life. What else? And just kind of letting yourself shift emphasis to the spacious aspect also. And then what will happen is that the mental weather or the movement of mind often does quiet down by itself. Sometimes the weather does settle, sometimes it doesn't, but you don't really need it to do anything in particular. Don't worry about your thoughts. Don't identify with your thoughts, but also don't try and squash them. You're just shifting where your focus emphasizes. Does it make sense? So it's a fairly simple instruction. And then once you get that fairly simple instruction, you know, with some proficiency, you can start getting into some elaboration. So here's where we have ultimate and relative perspectives. So when we look at, oh, this is too much about Mahamudra, let's just jump to the bold at the bottom. Mind is the individual's subjective mental activity of experiencing something. Okay, so you're settling there, and then you're asking yourself some questions about it. So the relative nature of mind, we always say, is clarity and awareness. But what we mean is clarity in the sense of mental activity giving rise to appearances, namely mental holograms or generic images of sights, sounds, smells, tastes, physical sensations, and thoughts, all accompanied by some level of happiness, various emotions, suffering, basic mental factors like attention and concentration. This is, it's like there's a mood to the weather, right? There's a mood to it. And that's totally normal. And then the awareness aspect of the relative nature of mind is engagement, some type of cognitive engagement. It's neither separate nor subsequent to appearance making. It's not that the thought first arises and then we think it. Awareness is just a subjective way of describing the same mental activity as appearance making. And then the mere, right, mere clarity and awareness is that all mental activity is and excludes there being a separate findable me as the agent or observer of this activity, or a separate findable mind, like some sort of immaterial machine doing it all. Mental activity occurs on the basis of a brain and a neural system, but that doesn't mean that the mind is equivalent or reducible to something physical. So Buddhists don't believe that the mind and the brain are the same thing, right? They're separate. The mind uses the brain. So then when we do ultimate nature of mind, voidness of self-established existence, voidness is the total absence of anything findable from the side of mere clarity and awareness, that by its own power establishes that there is such a thing as mental activity, not even these defining characteristics themselves. The only thing we can say that accounts for the fact that conventionally we all agree that we subjectively and individually experience things is mental labeling. Mental labeling is the fact that we as a society have the concept and word mind that we've coined as a mental label and designation for the moment-to-moment continuum of mere appearance-making and cognitive engagement that we all experience. Mental labeling isn't, however, an active practice that just creates anything. It's simply a way of accounting for the valid conventional existence of things. There is no self-establishing nature on the side of mental activity or of anything else that accounts for its existence. That's impossible. Voidness is the total absence of that impossible way of establishing the conventional existence of anything. So more to say about that, but basically it boils down to relative Mahamudra is mind seeing mind. Ultimate Mahamudra is mind seeing mind while understanding that that mind is empty of inherent existence. Are you with me? Questions so far? Not so far? So these are two methods of Mahamudra. You get good at the relative, then you move into the ultimate. The relative, sky not the clouds. The ultimate, sky not the clouds, and none of them exist from their own side. So it's as if like when you go to the optometrist and you're like getting fitted for new glasses and they say better this way or this way, and they're like doing all the lenses. It's like you're viewing something and then you bring in the lens of the ultimate that you see it through. So you're seeing the mind while using the mind to see the mind. Yeah, and you're just abiding in that experience. And then as you do that, you bring in the lens that knows none of this exists in and of itself from its own side independently. And that really starts to undermine over-identification with thoughts, emotions, and the I itself. Questions? Clear? Clearish? Clearish? Ish? All right, processing. All right. So then guess what? There's more. Then there's the Sutra and Tantra perspectives of the same thing. And so really, to make it really simple, like Sutra Mahayana and Tantra Mahayana have the same goal. And so the Mahamudra meditations that go with Sutra and the Mahamudra meditations that go with Tantra have the same goal, and they have the same division of do it the relative way, do it the ultimate way. What is different is speed. Okay, so The sutra is to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. The tantra is to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings quickly. So, of course, most of us would like to do things quicker because we're impatient and grumpy and tired of our suffering, and we don't want to hurt people anymore. However, the quickly is based on incredible discipline, very strong renunciation, determination to be free from samsara, very strong bodhicitta. So it's like super bodhicitta. You so much don't want sentient beings to suffer, but you're prioritizing practice in a much more intensive way, which is, of course, a lot more effort. But that's what makes it quick. Yeah. So when you hear Tantra, you might have all sorts of incorrect assumptions about what that word means. In Buddhism, it has a very specific meaning. It's related to mantra or protecting the mind. And there's lots of transformative practices and a lot of utilization of the subtle energy system. And all of it is still to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. So in Buddhism, there is no Tantra without bodhicitta. There is no point in practicing Tantra unless you want to do it for the sake of others. So if you have kind of hedonistic, kind of voyeuristic, spiritual materialism, kind of entertainment ways of viewing Tantra, then you're creating more causes for the negative patterns and miss the point. So the other differences are kind of how we see the mind. And strangely, in the Sutra tradition, the way we see the mind is more complicated than how we see it in Tantra. In the Sutra tradition, we talk about the category of teachings called Sem Sem Chung in Tibetan, or lyric in Tibetan, which is minds and mental factors and awarenesses and knowers. And it's one of those teachings that has lists and lists and lists and lists and lists of what does the mind do, what does the mind have, how does the mind work, all sorts of categorizations, which are all very, fairly straightforward. They just take a while to unpack. Tantra just talks about three things: coarse, subtle, extremely subtle. When we talk about the mind in Tantra, we kind of summarize it and boil it all down to the mind can be experienced in the coarse way, like the everyday experience of our senses, the subtle way, like what we experience in sleep or in meditation, and the extremely subtle way, which advanced meditators experience and we experience naturally at the time of death and a few other times as well. So what we're doing in Tantra Mahamudra is trying to get the extremely subtle mind to become manifest during our life and using that as the lens and also that as the focal object. So it's just more subtle and it takes a little bit more workshopping, but intellectually in a way is a bit easier. Yeah. So when you're doing the sutra version, you're gradually disengaging from distractions and emphasizing spacious clarity. In Tantra meditation, there's a lot of guru yoga practice. And it often includes the 8 disillusions that happen naturally at the time of death. And you use the catalyst of getting to that 8th stage and utilize the clear light that arises, that fundamental consciousness, and then go on to do your meditation. And so in Tantra Mahamudra, there's a lot of connecting with the guru, which really means that mind's ability to recognize wisdom, right? There's an outer teacher or an outer guru, but really they are what is speaking to your inner guru the most effectively. So it's not really about the person, but the person is very important. As time goes by, that person really becomes integrated with your inner voice that knows wisdom when it hears it. So it's a little bit like if you grew up in a Judeo-Christian family and they talked to you about God, and when you were little, you might have thought of God as kind of like Santa Claus in the sky, who you could talk to about your wishes, your hopes and fears, and you hoped you didn't get in trouble, and it was kind of personified in a paternal dad kind of way. And then you grew up and you thought, oh, surely it's not that simplistic and superficial. Maybe God is love. Or maybe God is creation. And you started to think a little bit more sophisticated about what God might be. In Buddhism, it's a little bit like that with the guru, where at first you need a person you can talk to, or a person that exists in real life that has a personality, that has a way of being that you can really relate to. They have a humanness to them. But eventually you start to integrate that guru-ness feeling so that you can hear teachings from anything everywhere, because your inner guru is awake. So in Mahamudra meditation, what you're trying to do is invite all the levels of guru to take the form of a Buddha. Could be, say, Chenrezig, the Buddha of compassion above the crown of your head. And then the Guru Buddha, Guru-Buddha, dissolves, absorbs into you, blessing your body, speech, and mind. And that acts as a catalyst for the visions that happen at the time of death that arrive at the extremely subtle fundamental mind. So that disillusion of the guru and that blessing of the guru, that mind meeting mind, like water into water, becomes the thing that helps you move your focus from coarse to subtle to extremely subtle. And then you go on to meditate from that place. So Tantra Mahamudra has a little bit more prayers, a little bit more devotion, a little bit more smells and bells, but all of that is just scaffolding to get your mind to this subtler place that trusts its own wisdom and can go to subtler places with it. Sutra Mahamudra is simpler in some ways because you're just trying to navigate distraction. You're just trying to work with whatever arises in your mind and try not to get too attached to it, try not to chase it, try not to squash it, try and really arrive at some evenness of mind and then stabilize there. So, really, I guess, logistically speaking, what we wind up doing in our tradition is understand Sutra Mahamudra, understand relative Sutra Mahamudra, understand Sutra Mahamudra, understand ultimate Mahamudra. Then move on to Tantra and do the same. So it's kind of like we do all variations eventually, but we have to start at the beginning, and that beginning needs to be held by a certain worldview that acts as kind of like a container or a path for us so that we don't go off on tangents that aren't useful. So that's what we're doing so far. I guess just to summarize that, Sutra Mahamudra, the technique, is reliant on the three principal aspects of the path, the three scopes, both method and wisdom. And the same is true of Tantra. It's just the method is unique. And the method is a lot more to do with these kind of cutting through appearances, ripening through rehearsal, overcoming ordinary appearance and grasping, methodologies that you see in general Tantra meditations, not just Mahamudra Tantra meditations. And when you're starting in sutra, at first you just have to fake it, right? You don't want to overthink it. You don't want to think I'm doing it right, I'm doing it wrong. You want to just kind of be like, let's say that I'm in the spacious clarity of my mind. Let's just say that I am. I don't know if I am. Let's just do that. Okay, distraction, I'm not following you. Okay, distraction, I'm not chasing you. Let's just adopt the attitude that that's the case. Then that becomes more and more true, right? The more you kind of fabricate that experience or just kind of test and play with that experience, the more that actually becomes the experience. And then through repetition, you no longer need to think yourself into it. It happens more directly and perceptually. And then with Tantra, you're just doing that at a subtler level, but it's the same basic idea. So there's a few recommended readings that I've got for this kind of thing. Lamieshi, really direct, really easy, really accessible. Mind Seeing Mind, very dense, very scholastic, but very cool. And then Geluk Kagyu tradition of Mahamudra by His Holiness is most of our go-to for those of us that do this practice a lot in our tradition. Because it's by His Holiness and translated by Alexander Berzin, it's just incredibly rich. And it's one of those that you can read like one chapter and just be with that one chapter for months and months and really explore it and deepen it before moving on. And it kind of never goes out of date for you. It's a really rich text, so I recommend that one a lot. Another way that people meditate on Mahamudra is they use poetry. And there's a lot of famous Mahamudra poets like Saraha. And those kind of poems, what you're trying to do is use the poem as the pointing out instruction as if it was Dzogchen. So you're just using this kind of pretty words and ideas to launch you into focusing on the relative nature of mind, stabilizing there, bringing in awareness of ultimate nature of mind. So some of the classic ones here's the ones from Saraha that get quoted a lot. He says, as Brahmins spin the sacred thread, the yogi puts his mind at ease. This very mind that's bound by mundane cares When loosened, we'll be free, there is no doubt. Even though water is soft, it turns solid like a rock if stirred constantly by wind. An ignorant mind, if stirred by thought, turns the formless into a solid entity. So it's just kind of speaking to the place you want to settle your attention, but in creative, beautiful words. And of course, they're ancient words like, what does Brahman spin the sacred thread? You have to have some awareness of the Hindu and Vedic traditions that preceded Buddhism. But the idea is that Brahma could effortlessly spin threads like on a spinning wheel, like an old-fashioned spinning wheel, that when you're really good at it, it becomes that beautiful flow state, effortless experience like you see old grandmas doing. Like if you've ever seen anyone spinning wool that's really good at it, they really get into this precise flow state and the thread gets so perfect and even. So Brahma spinning the sacred thread, like the thread of the universe, would even be more so. So that's the kind of focus we want, is that flow state focus, which is profound and magical, like Brahma spinning the sacred thread, but also quite ordinary, like your grandmother spinning wool in her living room. You know, it's like profound, it's sacred, and it's ordinary, and it's immediate, both. So you're feeling that kind of flow state, and you're loosening the mind. You're letting the mind be free, letting it be free from being bound by all the mundane cares, all the stresses and the worries and the everyday nonsense. And you're just kind of using that as inspiration of, okay, let go. Let go. Focus and let go simultaneously. And then if that's not enough, you can bring in the next verse, which is just think of how water is, so too the mind. When you stir up your mind, you get it all concrete and you make all the stories way too true and you double down on the stories and you're like, that's the only truth there is. And I've just gotten myself hard and blocked and all of those things. But the mind is like water that if I stop stirring it, it will become soft again and reflective again and beautiful again. Let it be. Does it make sense? So using verses like this can be really powerful. There's, the more technical, like Nagarjuna says, by purifying that which is the cause of samsara, one achieves the purity which is nirvana. Thus, the mind that is the root of all deficiencies and attributes, they originate only from the mind. So you're kind of going, oh, right. It's not this, it's not that, it's not the weather, it's not my mother-in-law, it's my mind, which is both the good news and the bad news. And everything else is a reflection of that mind. So there's a lot of cool quotes we can go to and a lot of different ways we can play with this. But if you were to use a root text as the meditation instruction itself, the one that we use most commonly on our tradition is called Highway of the Conquerors. Highway of the Conquerors of afflictions, not like pillaging conquerors, right? But you're conquering the negative tendencies of your own mind. So Highway of the Conquerors by Panchen Losang Chökyi Gyaltsen is just a beautiful, beautiful text. So I'll use that as a little bit of our touchstones for the meditation that we'll do. So if you hear me start to shift from normal meditation leading to something that sounds like a verse, it's from Highway of the Conquerors. Are there any questions before we do a meditation? Are there thoughts coming up for you guys? Some of you are very familiar, some of you not so much, so I know it's a mixed crowd. Please don't be shy. Yeah, Teresa, go ahead.
I'm not shy to
Oh,
ask
there's
you a
no audio.
question.
Sorry, Teresa, put it in the chat.
Oh, you can't hear me. Oh, okay.
We're having audio issues
That's okay.
with the Zoom. Type it in the chat if you feel inspired to. Yeah, any folks in the room, do you have any questions or ideas or points of resistance? Like it's Friday night. What do you want? Let's just sit. All right, let's just sit. All right, let's just sit. Ready? Okay. Get yourself nice straight back. And for a moment, don't try and do anything other than be in your own physical experience and see if you can invite your physical experience to relax and balance and release, imagining it come to its natural state. No clenching, no holding, just gentle balancing. We revive our motivation with this phrase from the Mahamudra lineage prayer, which says, "Please grant me blessings to cut in my mind stream the myriad ways of grasping at self. Arouse love and compassion, awakening mind, and quickly attain supreme Mahamudra, the unitive path." And then we'll start with Sutra Mahamudra on the relative nature of mind using Shine. Losang says, "Within a state where appearances are indistinct, do not alter anything at all by thoughts of hope, fear, or other delusions, but settle for a while in unwavering meditative equipoise. Do not cease mental activity, as in swoon or sleep. Post the century of undistracted mindfulness, and station alertness to be aware of any movement. Hold tightly to that clear and aware nature of mind, and starkly behold it." So for a while, just imagine your mental weather settling, becoming less important, less emphasized. And notice the other aspect of mind, which is still and spacious. That aspect that is still and spacious becomes your focus. Hold your attention there. You might notice a tendency towards heaviness and vagueness, or a tendency towards scattering and busyness. Just notice and come back to a vivid focus. Stabilize your attention on the clarity, becoming disinterested in anything else. Attend to that clarity. Be with the continuity of clarity. Ignoring anything else, but ignoring without annoyance or any judgment. The continuity of clarity. Any thought, anything that arises should be noted as that and just that. Alternatively, sever arising thoughts abruptly, as a skillful sword fighter would. When, after severing thoughts, your mind is stable, Then, without losing mindfulness, loosely relax. Tightly focus and loosely relax. That's the ground on which to place your mind. Nothing to add, nothing to subtract. Tightly focus and loosely relax. So it is said, and elsewhere it says, this mind, bound by worldly entanglements, is freed when relaxed. There is no doubt. As taught here, you should relax without distraction. When thoughts arise, you observe their nature. Then they naturally disappear, and a pure vacuity dawns. Likewise, When you examine the settled mind, you see an unobstructed, clear, and vivid vacuity. This is known as the merger of stillness and movement. Whatever thoughts may arise, do not stop them, but recognize their movement and place your attention upon their nature. Now view that clarity and awareness through the lens of the ultimate. Same clarity, same awareness, but now with a knowing that all of it lacks an inherent existence from its own side. Knows that there is no moment of consciousness that came out of nowhere from nothing. That every moment of mind depends on a previous moment of mind, and so on, back and back. View that clarity and awareness with the mind that knows the mind is not self. The mind is the basis for labeling self. And so whatever you understand of the ultimate, see if you can view that same spacious clarity with a quiet knowing about that. Not too many words, not too much analysis. A quiet knowing that observes that clarity and awareness differently than before. Your analysis, like a tiny minnow in a vast ocean, moving gradually more deep without disturbing the water it's in. And then gradually bring your focus back to the body, aware of your form sitting here, connected to the elements. Present, grounded. And rededicate with the same verse that we motivated with. Please grant me blessings to cut in my mind stream the myriad ways of grasping at self. Arouse love and compassion, awakening mind, and quickly attain supreme Mahamudra, the unitive path. Okay, so you can shift your attention out of meditation. And, some days it's going to go differently than others, but it could be that when you're relaxed at the end of the day, but not yet going into your preparation for sleep, is a really good time to do this meditation. Or in the morning, if you wake up fairly clear, it's a really good preliminary to do before other meditations or after other meditations, even for 5 minutes. So even if it's as simple as, okay, there are clouds and there is sky, zoom in on the sky, don't worry about the clouds. Seems overly simplistic, but 5 minutes of that can really help. And then if you feel able, you can gradually weave in more elaboration, more depth, more nuance to this practice. But if you can get that essential, simple training of there are thoughts, they are not me. There are thoughts, I don't have to believe them or follow them. They're information, they're stimulus, they're weather. Some of them are useful, some of them aren't, but they don't have to mean anything in and of themselves. And just kind of be curious about what arises for you, as if like you would be curious about weather in the sky. I'm just kind of interested, not identified. Do you have questions or anything interesting that came up that you feel comfortable sharing? Was it easy? Was it hard? Was it in between? Thumbs up? No thumbs? Yes, please. Go ahead. Calming and revealing. Oh, that's good. Oh, good. And it was easy. Mm. Yeah, being. Yeah, yeah. Oh, good. Yeah, good. We sometimes overthink it. There's analogies that are used traditionally for Mahamudra. You could pick any of these. These are from Milarepa. And the settling and the focusing, you can kind of think, okay, settle like a sun free of clouds, or settle like a Garuda soaring in the sky, or settle like a ship on a great sea, settle like a small boy looking at temple paintings, settle like the tracks of a bird flying in the sky, settle like spread out raw cotton. These are old fashioned kind of analogies, but if you think of like, here, this one, number 4, a small child looking at temple paintings does not investigate or analyze the subtle details of the picture, but looks unwaveringly at the paintings in a general way. In the same way, when the mind is focused on its object, pleasant and unpleasant objects of the 5 consciouses may appear, but the mind remains focused single-pointedly on the object without investigation or analysis, attachment or aversion. So imagine if there's like a little kid came into this temple and was looking at all these colors and all these pictures and all of this, they would have kind of that wonder, just kind of curious, open wonder, but maybe not a lot of judgment about it, especially if it was a very little kid, like 3. Once they're like 5, they'll be like, what's that? What's that? What's that? But, think of like earlier than that when they're just like, lots of color, lots of space, but it's not pulled apart into good or bad. It's not pulled apart into what is this or that. It's just kind of one analogy I like myself is imagine how you are on a really relaxed day, like sitting in a rocking chair looking at the sky. You're like on a porch, right? And you're just like rocking slowly with nothing to do that day, but you're quite happy and relaxed because, whatever needs to be done has been done. That kind of spacious, open awareness where you're very clear, but you're not vague. Do you know that one? Sitting on a rocking chair. I don't know if they're out of style now. I don't know. I love a rocking chair. Whatever kind of analogy works for you, but like birds soaring is also quite a good one because there is effort involved for a bird to soar, but once they've kind of hit the airstream, there's play and movement and focus, but not tightness and over analysis. Just imagine when they're like really playing in the jet streams, and it's kind of cool to when you see birds who are obviously not particularly hunting or fleeing when they're just playing with the wind. There's that kind of combination. See, so in the Zoom it says moments of real calm with no thoughts. Yeah, and it's so tricky because we don't want to feel like there's a problem with thoughts or that we have to get rid of thoughts. What we want to do is change our relationship to thoughts. And often in doing that, they quiet down or they become less verbal. But you're not trying to like shut off or dissociate. Do you know what I mean? So it's like not having thoughts in particular is no great virtue. I mean, I think my dad on his recliner at the end of the day has no particular thoughts. See his face has got his feet up. He's like, what? No thoughts is not a virtue, but changing your identification with thoughts really makes you calm. And then when they stop being so noisy, it becomes such a freedom. So if you can kind of be like, these are things that arise like weather, but they're not me or mine, then there can be that spaciousness. And then when you move into the ultimate, who has thoughts and or who doesn't? Who is the thinker or who isn't? This kind of lens that you bring to it that's curious, but not like hungry curious. Yeah, you're bringing this lens of who is the thinker, who is the watcher. It's who is me? It feels like mind is me, but then something is watching mind. Is the watcher me? Then you get into kind of infinite regress, and then you come back to, is the body holding it? Is the body controlled by it? And it becomes this interesting experiment of who is in charge here of this meditation. And you realize it's a dependent arising of countless causes and conditions coming together for a particular kind of focus. And then that makes choice of thought a lot easier. You can choose what to think with a lot more flexibility. And then when there are thoughts that are really disruptive or invasive or problematic, you have a lot more choice whether to believe them or not, whether to feed them or not. You start to understand that there are patterns of thought that you've had for so many years that made sense at the time, but have an expiration date that you've forgotten about and they no longer serve you. But you're so used to having them, it feels like you have no choice. But if you're starting to get spacious and realize that these are just dependent arisings like weather, you can think, oh, wow, that's a weird thought. Anyway, oh, that's a cool thought. Anyway, oh, it's an angry thought. Anyway, not therefore I'm an angry person or therefore it's true, right? You have a lot more space for choice. And then those thoughts that are insightful, that are important, you have time to deepen and cultivate. And those ones that are useless, you just see them as useless, but you don't think, therefore I am useless. You just think, oh, that's an old one. Who cares? Yeah. Does it make some sense? So you're not trying to block thoughts, you're just trying to let them gently turn down the volume and change your relationship to them. Someone in the Zoom asks, going beyond thoughts. And it's tricky because we're not trying to pretend that there is no conception before that's true, but we're kind of like moving our way towards getting in that more direct experience place that our senses can do more naturally than our mental faculties, right? So if you're seeing something for the first time, there's like a second of no judgment. And then in the next second, you're like, I like it, I don't like it, it's good, it's bad, it's this, it's that. But the first second of seeing something, often there's that like flash of just being with it in that kind of direct way. It's vivid and bright. And it's not like that's a virtue in and of itself, but what we're trying to cultivate in this meditation is more chances for choice rather than this immediate, I like it, I want it, I need it, you better not take it from me. Or I don't like it, get it away from me, it's bad, now I'm anxious. We're just trying to have a little bit more of, I have opinions arising, whatever. You just feel so much more chill about life, a lot more in the flow state with life. And you still have opinions and preferences, but they don't rule you and they don't steal your peace. So just kind of inviting the space back in or revisiting the space that's already there, however you view it, this becomes a really important mechanism for abiding in a lot deeper level of contentment. And then your relationships having a lot more power for connection because you're not crowding them with all your expectations and all of your baggage and all your hopes and fears. You're just present with people as they are today, enjoying them as they are today. And if they're problematic today, you're like, oh, all right, less attention today. Fair. But it's not rattling you in the same way. It's giving you more choices, more depth of choice. So Mahamudra meditation is ultimately to kind of break through over-identification with mind itself, while at the same time training mind itself. So it's an interesting kind of conundrum or paradox, but it can be so playful and so poetic if you let it be. And when we look at any of these analogies, I think that we can start to feel like there's a mandate to like do all of them, but actually you just want to pick one that you like. Use that as kind of your frame of reference for spaciousness and clarity. So when you look at any of these verses, some of them will get to you, some of them won't. This one from Sutra I like a lot that says, the mind is like an artist, it creates. All existential realms arise. All these are created by the multifarious mind. Yeah, the mind is like an artist, it creates. It's interesting. Then there's all things appear as perfect reality to the mind. Apart from the mind, no reality as such exists. To perceive external reality is to see wrongly, which isn't to say there is nothing external, but it means that the way we view the external is completely through the lens of the mind. And so we're just kind of like dealing with our own filters all the time. So these kind of piercing the veil mechanisms, they can be confronting or they can be playful. And if they're too confronting too often, you can develop a resistance to doing this work. But if they feel playful and curious and what is real anyway, then it becomes quite a joy to go deeper and deeper and get into what is this self? What is this self? Who is it that I'm trying to defend and protect? Who is it that feels like it needs respect and dignity? Who is it that wants validation? Who is it? And in the beginning, it can feel like personality or body or training or culture or whatever it is. And that's true on one level. But then you get deeper and you start to identify as the mind itself. And this meditation goes straight to that and asks, are you the mind? What is the mind? And who is in control of it? And then you realize that there's a whole interdependent pattern of weather that is influencing each other and then influencing other minds, and that there is kind of no hub or core to it all, even though there is some chance for choice and control. So you start to kind of play with how to make this mind healthy, beneficial, to be of benefit to others. And it becomes an interesting play of what influences what. And then what do I invite in? So another way to do this meditation is when you think of the guru and you think of those moments in your life where you have experienced resonance, of having been taught wisdom because your mind could hear wisdom and respond to that wisdom outside, that feeling of mind meeting mind, seemingly outside mind meeting inside mind, or someone else and you, that kind of like resonance of wisdom. And then you imagine that dissolving and absorbing into you and creating what is called Nawa Pinpun in Tibetan, which is a state in which all appearances are indistinct. And it has a characteristic of being kind of bittersweet, like you're longing for a connection that you once had but don't remember. That feeling of deep knowing and closeness that sometimes happens in teachings with great lamas, or sometimes happens in moments in nature and connection with wild animals, or can happen with your deepest friend in a moment of mutual clarity. It's those moments where resonance between minds seems to be in alignment with wisdom and depth. And that meeting, it's like, it's hard to remember exactly what it was like, but there's part of us that has a deep, deep remembrance of connection with wisdom and is hungry for it. And that Ngawa Penpun, a state in which all appearances are indistinct, is supposed to have that characteristic of kind of a melancholy or kind of a bittersweet hunger for something unremembered or half remembered, of closeness with wisdom and connection with wisdom, that has a relational, personified kind of quality, which we could call guru, right? And from that state, then you kind of use that as a segue to then move into Mahamudra from the perspective of the fundamental clear light mind. So you think, okay, we've heard these Buddhist teachings on what happens at the time of death between the body and the mind, the disconnection between the body and the mind, and how there's these natural visions that arise when the earth element, the bones, don't support consciousness anymore. There's kind of a vision of a mirage, right? And then when the water element is no longer supporting consciousness in the way that it did before, there's kind of this mental appearance of like billowing smoke or steam. And there's these visions that happen naturally, but we imagine that they're happening in real time, and just kind of like move through disconnection from body and mind until it is just mind at its most fundamental state, free from opinions and worries, in union with that kind of Nawa Penpun state in which all appearances are indistinct, kind of fusion with the guru, all of that. But it's not with words, it's just kind of like union with truth that has a blissful characteristic. And sometimes just by pretending that it's happening, you can get it to happen. Just pretending, right? And then when you're there, stay there, see what happens. It's interesting. So I really recommend starting simple, starting curious, just disengage from your excessive identification with thought, excessive identification with mind, while being really clear and focused. Spacious, not spacey. And as you get good at that, you can weave in all these different kinds of nuances. And I think that the power of Mahamudra meditation is that you realize that you didn't need space from the difficulties in your life. You always had the ability to reconnect with space that was there. And then you can be, crowded in a Delhi airport, or you can be alone in the desert and you feel equally at peace. Questions? Thoughts? Yeah, go ahead. I think there's a microphone. Could you pass it back? Thank you so much. The opening motivation point comes from the Mahamudra lineage prayer. And it's the refrain that we come back to. So the Mahamudra lineage prayer of our tradition, kind of goes through the different historical figures who taught this really clearly. And then one by one, you're asking them, please grant me blessings or inspiration to cut in my mind stream the myriad ways of grasping at the self And then the method side, arouse love, compassion, the mind of enlightenment, and achieve that union of method and wisdom. So the whole lineage Lama prayer could be found in that book, Mind Seeing Mind. And let's see, I'll just show you the first part. So Mind Seeing Mind is a collection of Mahamudra texts translated by Roger Jackson. And this one starts with Namo Mahamudraya. In the mansion of the three spontaneous Buddha bodies, where the primordial Buddha, head of all families, to the pervasive Lord, great Vajradhara, I appeal. Please grant me blessings to cut in my mind stream, etc., etc. So we start with Vajradhara, which is the appearance of Buddha Shakyamuni when he taught Tantra. So it's indicating that this is Tantra Mahamudra that we're going to be doing. And then it goes to Manjushri and the refrain again, and then Losang Drapa on the refrain again, etc., like that. So if you want to read the whole thing, it's in Mind Seeing Mind by Roger Jackson. It's beautiful. Thank you. Any other questions or thoughts before we call it a night? Or arguments? Arguments are fine as well. Doubts? Jokes? Okay. Well, we can call it a night then. Thank you so much for your time, everyone. And have a great rest of your evening. Thank you. So we'll do the regular dedication prayers, just the short one. Scrolling. There we go. Oh, too far. There we go. Show John Chu Sam Jorin Boshe Ma Ke Pan Nam Ke Gyochi Ke Pan Yam Ba Me Pa Yang Gone Gon Du Pa La Show. Thank you very much. Have a good night.